The Highland Hills tower the skies. But the shadows they cast draw the spirits near. After all, tomorrow.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very, very special Wednesday night. Indeed, we are joined by Drew, my co-host, and we are joined by the man himself, Neil, our Storey. My God, thank you so much, Neil, for coming on the show tonight. It's short notice, Tay.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I was like, I look at my friends and a lot of people that I know are like, can you need to get Neil Storey back in your show? When you get Neil Storey back in your show, I'll do what to pester him. The man's just had a hip replacement. For good God, you know. And they're like, oh, come on, you can do it. Get him on. And I messaged them and I'm just going to say it again. Thank you so much for coming on. And it's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because we were talking about spies before the show, and it is so fascinating. Could you tell them a wee bit about your new book that you've coming out, Neil?
That Christopher is going to get.
I'll give it a shameless plug. I'm going to, because I was telling you about something we could maybe do later in the year.
Yes.
Or sooner, we'll do something, but that's the new book, Nazi Spies and Collaborators in Britain. And inside here, for the very first time, we map all of the spy landings. They came by parachute. That's down in East Anglia, Cambridgeshire Way, Northamptonshire. But they also came by rubber boats and one dropped by parachute on the Eastern Highlands of Scotland.
That's amazing.
Yep.
And so, having delved into the MI5 files, that some of them are fairly newly released, and had a good old dig around in the archives. We've got some.
That's amazing. I mean, I've heard stories. My late uncle, he used to tell me stories that I was telling you about before the show, and he used to tell me stories about the U-boats and how they would come in and how they would actually try and infiltrate, and that's how they used to drop off the spies. And I always find it fascinating. There's a film, I think it was made in 1960s, or was it 19? What's the one where it's the paratroopers and the Germans take over the town? It's a wee English village.
This is a film based on the book by Jack Higgins. It is called The Eagle Has Landed.
Right.
You've got Michael Caine in it. You've got Larry Hagman playing an American Army officer. And that's interesting how that story came about, because Jack Higgins was on holiday in Norfolk.
Yeah.
And he found a headstone, not to German paratroopers or soldiers, but to German sailors in a churchyard. We think it is the one to two German sailors that were washed up on the beach at Overstrand. Now, if you know a little bit about Norfolk history, Overstrand is the heart of poppy land, where the poppies used to sway. It's not far from Cromer, down the road from Sheringham.
That'd be
But
nice.
the weird thing is, when Jack Higgins liked that idea, he developed the idea. So although it was filmed somewhere else in Great Britain, the story is set actually around the Melton Constable area, which was quite a railway centre in its day, and along the North Norfolk coast. So, but what is intriguing, that I don't know whether Jack Higgins was told the story, or I don't know, maybe he sensed something about it. Those two sailors, they were not in a sailor's uniform.
Okay.
And in fact, there was no post-mortem, and to our knowledge, there's no inquest.
Wow.
That's a bit suspicious.
They were just, it's wartime. You get a lot of bodies washed up. But what is intriguing, there are a few instances of these bodies being washed up on our beach. Our beaches in North Norfolk. And they're not merchant sailors. There's no documentation on these people. But there's something, possibly a glasses case or a manufacturer of clothing, that gave away that they were Germans.
Right.
Right.
And the intriguing thing is that in the memoir of a Royal Scots officer who had deployed to the North Norfolk coast, I think he calls it Frontline Town, and he reminisces about the Sheringham Cromer area. He tells the story of one night a rubber boat did wash up at Wells.
Right.
One of his comrades, who was another officer in charge of a patrol party, was out, and there was a man that came out of the rocks at the top of the long embankment at Wells, clearly wet from the boat. Possibly the boat turned over, and this guy panics. There's a fight, and he kills the man.
Right.
Now, the trouble is, if you've got a spy, you're supposed to take them alive so they can be interrogated. But it's a fierce fight. According to the story, and it's, I've no reason to doubt the guy, the regional security liaison officer is summoned to the scene. At least, the man that wrote the memoir was the battalion intelligence officer, so he had to know.
Mhm.
It's the body's taken away very, very quickly.
Right.
There's MI5 all over it.
Oh, yeah.
And what is intriguing that, there's nothing more heard about that. And then these two bodies are washed up at Overstrand around about the same time in 1940. There's no ID. It's thought that the guy at Wells that was killed, they've had a spectacles case that had German writing on it.
Right.
So when they landed as sabotage parties. They landed them as reconnaissance parties. They landed them either by fishing boat or rubber boat.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know, they normally worked in parties of 3. So who knows? What I do know is in the Eastern Highlands of Scotland, the only woman we know to have landed by a rubber boat was landed at Port Gordon.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, I've heard about that.
Cool.
It was,
And
I was doing history at the school and they were talking about that.
she's quite a character. But there were 3 of them that came in at Port Gordon, but there were others that are often far lesser known along the coast. The sabotage party came in. There was a couple of guys, again, a reconnaissance party, and you had one parachutist. And Fraserburgh was a nightmare place for intelligence because that's one of the old bases for the Fisher Fleet.
Mhm.
So they used to come in from Norway, but the Scandinavian countries are occupied by the Germans. So the Germans were trying to mix in spies with the crews of boats.
There you go.
So it was a nightmare of a place, a vulnerable area.
Yeah.
And I dare say there were spies coming in and out.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
See, a thing that I've always wondered, and I've never looked this up, and you see when spies were captured in this country during the war,
Yes.
what happened to them? Were they all executed? Or
No.
did they all...
Spy camp up at
Right.
Douglas, Christopher.
The camp in my village was mostly pilots that
Oh,
were
was it?
kept there.
Right.
See when Hitler's aide fled from Germany and they landed in the town called Hamilton. He was friends. A lot of people don't realise this, but the Lord in my village, Lord Hume, his grandfather was his friend. That's why he landed there. He was friends with Lord Hamilton,
Right.
where he landed, but he was also friends with Lord Hume. And I do know for a fact they put him in that camp, but I don't think it was for long. It was only for maybe like a night. And then he was moved, obviously, down to London to get interrogated. Because did they not give him to the Russians? Is that not what happened to him? He was given to the Russians and they, in the end, hung him. I'm sure.
What, Rudolf Hess?
Yeah.
Now, what happened to Rudolf Hess? It's intriguing because not everything has come out about what happened. He actually landed under the assumed name of Lieutenant Horn.
That's right.
And he wanted to go and see the Duke of Hamilton. Interestingly, the Duke of Hamilton had been to the Olympics in 1936. He'd got on quite well with some of the people he had met there. there are links. We have to be careful because they're not membership links, but there are links with the Anglo-German Fellowship, and we have to remember this is a time when a lot of people hoped for peace, and they hoped by having peace you can build links. But the trouble is, the Anglo-German link actually in World War II turned into quite a nasty right-wing organization. So things metamorphose in the spy's story. But this is an intriguing thing. When you've got Hess, he's Adolf Hitler's deputy. They've come up from nothing. He's Hitler's right-hand man. When Hitler is imprisoned, Hess and the other senior officers had to keep the Nazi party running, really. So Hess, once he is captured, there are several stories, some of which can be extremely fictional, but I believe in that Hess is on a mission where he wanted to discuss peace terms.
Right.
Yeah.
And he believed that he was meeting Duke of Hamilton. The story that's often repeated is the Duke of Kent.
Yeah.
And that he'll be meeting with Duke of Kent, Duke of Hamilton. There were connections with the abdicated monarch, Edward VIII, the Duke of Windsor. The Duke of Kent had remained close to his brother. They had actually met on the continent before the outbreak of war. And of course, there are some very embarrassing letters between the Duke of Windsor and communicating with Adolf Hitler. Shortly after the Duke of Windsor gets married, he actually goes to Berchtesgaden and has a nice afternoon tea with his new wife and Uncle Adolf.
Right. Wow.
Yes.
So, and there is a thought that, because it's forgotten, you'll see these pictures of Hess as a megalomaniac shouting the lot, but he was pretty savvy. And the thought is he was going to come over, deal with these peace documents, maybe even broker a deal, and fly back.
Right.
There was this
Naively.
it might seem a little naive, but there is that part of the story. He was arrested. He was taken down. He was held in a number of centres for interrogation. Now, when you capture pilots, yes, there are internment centres, but when you're talking with senior characters, you're talking with spy landings, they use different facilities for them because it's very sensitive. The spies that landed, they were taken down to London, and they were put to a place called Camp 020, which was on a place called Ham Common, and that's a very intriguing place because they used psychological warfare there. Now, how intense that was, it remains to be seen. They certainly use fear tactics, like you'll end up in room 101 if you don't tell us.
Wow.
Using that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the favorites that they would use, they use stool pigeons. So what happened to the spies? Were they all hanged? No. On every spy mission that landed, they would try and keep one. And the one of the spies that they saved, that would be the one they would feel would be most likely to turn and work for them. So, for example, they might be able to say, if it hadn't reached the newspapers that they'd been captured, we could use them, because you could pretend that they've gone to ground and they're sending messages back as operational spies that you can create and you can manipulate. If they are named, or two male spies are captured off the Scottish coast, the chances are they are doomed. But when you look at the early accounts of the landing at Port Gordon, until comparatively recent decades, it only names two men.
See,
It does not name Vera Schallberg, who landed under the name of Vera Eriksson. They do not name her. They also didn't want to hang women. They were
Right.
very worried about that. It never gone down well.
Mhm.
So, and also, if you think about it, wartime, you know, we had Edith Cavell, the spy in the First World War. Was she a spy? Wasn't she a spy? The Germans certainly executed her as a spy in October
Wow.
1915.
Yes.
The world put their arms up to that. You really didn't want another repetition. Vera
Right.
Schallberg was not a nurse, but it's the execution of a woman. See if you could turn her. But
Right.
like several of them, did she turn or not? She might have given the
Mm.
indication that maybe she could. Remember, these are spies.
Yeah.
You know, there are some people from occupied countries that the Germans would have them over a barrel.
Oh yeah.
They'd
Oh,
say,
definitely. Mhm.
"We've got your mum and dad.
Yeah.
They're going to go to a
Mhm.
detention camp. If you don't, go and work as a spy."
Mhm. I do
Yeah.
believe that happened more than you know. Mhm.
Absolutely right. So they had the holdover folks to do it. Others were voluntary spies, quite willing to do that and work in espionage.
Oh,
I
The
think
thing
it's
is,
fascinating.
they're pretty wily. They're pretty wily, so they can give the impression, "Oh yes, I will help you."
yeah.
The rest of their spy team, they are tried. The others go to the gallows. They've got you, and you could say, "Well, yeah, I'm not quite so sure about that." Or,
Most of them
you
are
know,
double-barreled.
See, I find
but
that fascinating.
yeah,
That book that this new book that you've written,
I know.
because
yeah.
everybody, you need to go and buy this book. Honestly, I'm going to order that after the show
But what
because
they
that's
did
I'm
was,
definitely going to get it if we're going there.
you see, if some of them wouldn't turn or they couldn't turn them to use them on radios, they would sit them in the cell. Now they'd have to
right.
trust them, but they would be
Yeah.
briefed, and they would just have a conversation. Now in these cells, there are microphones everywhere
Oh yeah.
Right.
and around the building. So if they go to a quiet corner for a conversation, it's probably being recorded. You know, that sort of thing. There were other
Mm.
facilities like this around the country too. And they might well fess up, you know, particularly if you've got a stool pigeon trying to, you know, coax it out of them. So that was one way you could kind of earn your keep and get a little bit of an easier life. But what we've also got in the back of this book is the blacklist. Now, the blacklist, I didn't know about this until we did a documentary years ago called Hitler's Britain.
Yeah.
If this country had been, if it had been occupied, you know,
Yeah.
we had a secret home guard who would have risen up, and
That's right.
yeah, and they
That's
were
right. I've
also
heard
given
about them.
brown
Yeah.
envelopes with a name or names. Include that one fella did tell us it was the chief constable was named there because he knew where all the hideouts for where the home guard were, and they had to be shot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's
Well,
weird you say that, Neil, because I watched a program. Oh, it must have been about 6 months ago, and it was about this team after the war, and their job after the war was going and finding all the weapons caches that was for that secret army, and there'd be a field that would look absolutely fine, but there'd be like a bunker hidden in that field, full to the neck with grenades and machine guns, and
Oh, wow.
that was there. And you know, still to this day, they're coming across things.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
coming across like is it the Thompson machine guns and stuff like that,
Oh
and
yes,
grenades.
yes. And they had
Yeah.
phosphor bombs, all
That's right.
Albright and Wilson bombs, which are in a glass bottle, and they would
Yeah.
often be kept underwater in streams in a wooden crate, and they
Right.
are occasionally being found, or they're buried under hedgerows and things, you know. But you see, what intrigued me was these lovely old boys that said that they had these brown envelopes with names in it, but they wouldn't tell us who the names were.
Mhm.
One old boy reminisced. He said, I knew the fella. He said, one of my neighbours, don't know why he was on the list, but we had to ask the question, you know, that if the order had come, that, you know, you have to execute these people
Yeah.
because they are considered unreliable in the event of
Well,
a
that's that.
Nazi
Mhm.
invasion. They would
Obviously,
answer quite simply, they're on the list, they are the enemy, they're not on our side.
They wouldn't be on the list for no reason at all. They'd be on the list because the security services probably did a background check.
Definitely been
Well, this is what
blacklisted.
I discovered. And every region in Great Britain, there were about 15 all told regions across the country. Each one of them had a regional commissioner. And the regional commissioner had a regional security committee that would be made up of chief constables, representatives of MI5 and the local intelligence officers. Each of the chief constables, because their people would be reported for their anti-British behaviour. Some of them had quite a long record for anti-British in behaviour. A lot of them were interned in 1940. Churchill said, "Collar the lot." And if you had been in the British Union of Fascists as a known and active member, if you had been a member of the Nazi Party from Germany, if you had come over from Germany, they worried they got mixed in with people. So even Jewish people who had fled Nazi oppression were arrested. They were soon released once they went through the committee, but they said, "Collar the lot." But once they released a lot of these people, and it seems, to be honest with you, the committees were a little bit of an easy touch on some of those. MI5 needed to know that these people were at large again, in case there was an invasion. So the list runs into name after name after name, and each one of them.
You get them? Wow, brilliant!
I found the lists; they're all there. For the Eastern region, and that's the East Coast. It goes for page after page after page. It's alphabetical.
Wow.
And what they did was the security committee would have, and it includes people like Major General JFC Fuller. He was known as Boney Fuller. But if you think about, if I show you the section of the book, how many are there in the blacklist? That's the blacklist.
Oh my goodness, there's a lot.
Oh my God.
That's the blacklist. Now remember, they are the reports. So they are not just names, they are the reports that were presented before the regional security committee.
It's okay.
So this is the reasons why are they on the list?
Right.
Why are they dubious people? And the judgment of the committee that they are considered, in quotes, unreliable in the event of an invasion.
Oh my goodness, that's going to
There
be
you go.
amazing to read that.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is the
each
link.
person.
I went and searched the link on Amazon Prime. There's an Amazon Prime. If anybody's got Amazon, guys, there's the link there. Please go and buy a copy, or even for someone you know that's into war. I'm going to get a copy of that.
It's a lot of work, but if you live on the East Coast, particularly in the invasion area, really down because they didn't really allow the Germans that had been released back into the South Coast because that was immediate invasion area. Right. So if you'll see them in the Eastern region, they'll go up into Lincolnshire and then inland into the home counties.
Right.
You never know that you might just find a Nazi next door.
Well, that's that.
Do you think in the history of World War II, do you think there was any spies that thought, I'm going to Britain, and then instantly, as soon as they landed on the shore, they surrendered?
Yes.
Do you think that
quite rightly?
Yeah.
You know, there was a man that stays down Wood Park. He doesn't stay there, and he died many years ago. And my mum used to take us down to see him run about our birthdays and Christmas because he was actually an Austrian man, and he was a prisoner of war over here. But he was really good with his hands and carpentry and things. He made me a big doll's house. But he was a prisoner of war. I'll need to ask his name, my mum, and let you know.
Oh, you must. You must.
Keep his name in the books.
There were two young fellas that came down in Scotland.
Yeah.
And they just knocked on the door.
Right.
A little picture of
Edwin. I know his first name was Edwin, but a lot of them will be named Edwin, I would assume.
This is the little village of Pennon. It's a little fishing village. Look, there it is.
Oh, wow.
on the Highlands, and these are John Moe and Tor Glad. And they
Right.
literally walked to the local house and said, knock, knock, knock.
Can you help
Yes,
me?
yeah, there you go, we give up.
What do you think happened to
Brilliant.
them?
I bet they got a hot meal, and a nice cup of tea.
Yeah. I mean, it's dangerous, but
Yeah.
because they were told if you fall into the hands of the British, oh, they're going to torture you. They're going to do awful.
Yeah, and I bet they didn't.
Yeah.
But they had the code names of Mutt and Jeff, and
Oh my God.
they were certainly easily turned.
Yeah.
See, that's actually quite good because the British could have used them to basically send false messages back to the Nazis.
That's what they did. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
could turn them reliably, they had a few that they could do that. Some of them became quite remarkable double agents,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
been covered by other historians than myself. So I don't really look at the double agents like Agent Zigzag. There are
Yeah.
other stories to be told, that have already been told.
There's
But
so many.
there are. There are.
Mhm.
This one just looks at the Nazi spies and collaborators, and then the next one after that again will take a few years because we're waiting for the release on files, and some of those
Yeah.
I'm having to get freedom of information requests because they're saying they won't release some of the files for 100 years.
Oh, wow.
So we'd be
Yeah.
talking about 2045, 2047
Right.
before, and I really can't see how they
Oh.
can justify when
Yeah.
they have people associated with those who are named there at this moment in
Mhm.
time. The precedents, to me at least, and I
Yeah.
don't have the privy information, but they say, well, it's the next generation. Well, I say, well, it's 70, it's 80 years now.
It's
Yeah.
a bit much.
Is it people really going to go
Anybody
ahead?
that's this descendants for the type of people will already been established in their communities and will never get anything to happen to them anyway. So I don't see why they don't just let you know the information.
See,
Well, I just asked the question, and I
Yeah.
do it respectfully. I
push it
don't wish
forward.
to burn
See,
any bridges, but I
it's-
have annotated
Mm.
my book where the freedom of information request has been turned down. It is
Oh.
noted in the book, so
Wow.
that if they get old and grey and maybe don't make it when they are released, at least the pointers are there.
You
for
could
those that
actually,
come next.
Push it for it, yeah.
could maybe get like a petition together and maybe petition like an MP to maybe release
Well,
them early?
the number of those that we need to get freedom of information, I think it's a bit of a big job at the moment for
Right.
the number that are concerned. They're being pretty good,
Hmm.
and for those I've put the case for, and others, they've been pretty sensible about it.
Right.
There are 3 in particular at this moment that are pending. One in particular, I won't name any names.
Oh,
One in particular, I think it should be released. I believe she is another spy.
oh, a
Okay.
lady one again.
Oh
Brilliant.
God, yeah. Very, very interesting character. I think she needs to come out. And sometimes there are no files whatsoever, ladies and
bet.
gentlemen, in the archives. We're not even waiting for them to come out.
They've been ripped up
But-
long ago.
Sometimes you've got to remember it's wartime. And years ago,
Well,
I
that's it, isn't
was
it?
in the civil service, and I can remember seeing officers when I started. It's before the days when everybody had a computer on their desk, and there'd be stacks of files. And in
Yeah.
wartime, with these regional officers, stuff goes missing, stuff gets blown up,
Exactly.
in air raids and all sorts. And maybe, and I, maybe those files don't exist anymore.
Mm.
Others, come on, guys. Come
If I
on.
was,
Here's a question for you, Neil. Who's your most interesting character you've researched?
Oh my
It's a
word!
good one, Drew.
Who's your favourite?
Oh,
About the
Vera
loads are
Erickson.
right interesting
Vera
people.
Erickson. She's on the cover. There she is. There
Right.
she is.
Oh.
She was known as the beautiful spy.
Right.
She's utterly intriguing. Her brother was a senior SS officer.
All
Super
right.
fit,
This is.
you know. She
Wow.
claims to have been a ballerina.
Right.
She was definitely operating in espionage in London with a lady of faded continental nobility. And they had this thing called a salon. Now, this isn't where you get your hair done. This is
Yeah.
kind of soirees
Obviously, I
and
don't.
get-togethers funded by German intelligence, where they're trying to get information from politicians and senior army officers. When war breaks out, or just before the breakout of war, Vera goes back to the continent and to Germany, where she is deployed on this mission that takes her to Port Gordon.
Oh.
Once she is captured, and I'll tell you this, there's three of them that land. There's one chap, he goes off to Bucky. He's working under the code name of Werner Valti, and he actually ends up
The names.
he's on Edinburgh Station, and a little detective superintendent by the name of Wee Willie Merrilees. Isn't it lovely? Wee Willie. And he was a great character. He became one of the chief constables of one of the Scottish constabularies. Wonderful man. And he was a martial arts expert.
Right.
And they knew this fella was going to be coming back because Valti, at least that was the code name he was working under. His real name was Robert Petter. But Valti had come to Edinburgh and he wanted to go and get something to eat. So he had actually put his luggage into the left luggage office, right? And got off with the ticket to come and collect it later. Now, the word had got out that Vera Schellberg and Karl Drucker, who she had landed with, two people that had racked up at Port Gordon Station early in the morning with their feet, shoes, and lower parts of their coats soaking wet. And they haven't got local accents in this obscure little village on the Scottish coast. And they let drop that there was somebody else they'd landed with. So the alert had gone out, and this fella had proved suspicious, and so they knew he was coming. So Wee Willie Merrilees borrows a porter's uniform, and they wait with the porter that had helped this Robert Petter find the left luggage office. He was pointed out, and so once he goes and gets his baggage out, he comes, and Wee Willie moves in. and I think Werner Valti, Petter, realizes what's happening, slips his hand in his pocket, and Wee Willie gives him a deft move. This little Mauser miniature pistol that was loaded goes flying on the floor. Imagine this is Edinburgh Station.
Imagine that! Wow!
This is Waverley, in the early evening. And of course, Wee Willie has disarmed him. He's got a live German spy, all of that drama. Wow. So Petter gets taken away. And he ends up like Karl Drucker. They both end up on the gallows. They don't,
right.
The press.
Amazing story.
This dramatic arrest of spy. They try and suppress it. But there's no mention of Vera. Vera, she never said she'd definitely work for them, but they see it's the best chance. They don't want to hang a woman. So they incarcerate her. They try and gently get the stool pigeons in to chat to her, use them, use people that know her. The lady of continental nobility, the Countess Chateau de Thierry. They have a chat with her. And they think, are we going to get hard line on Vera? And you don't really want to do that. So they think, what about doing the softly approach?
Yeah.
And they think, what about if we get her to take her out, get her some nice clothes, and get her to spend a nice weekend somewhere in the home counties in a pleasant family home.
Oh, right.
And so they did. In the files there are even the receipts for the clothing that they bought her.
She was that easily bought.
Well, she
It's
never,
amazing.
to our knowledge, came right good. But the man who kind of looked after her and was the intelligence man that was so amiable, he was known as Klopp, Agent Klopp, and that was his kind of
Wow,
nickname.
what a name.
His
I
surname
know.
was Ustinov, and
Okay,
his
that's
son was Peter Ustinov.
All right.
And if you remember Peter Ustinov, he played Hercule Poirot on
That's
Murder
right.
on the Nile.
that's
Peter
Uh-huh.
Ustinov was an actor. He was an ambassador, on the world stage for peace. One of the greatest storytellers of all time. A great favourite on guest, on talk shows and all sorts. Peter was lovely. And that was his dad, Klopp Ustinov. And he was the
Wow.
man that gently interrogated Vera Shalberg.
Yeah.
So
That's-
you're going to want to know, did she really turn? Well, we don't know exactly.
Mm.
I don't know yet.
But you're going to say, well, what happened to her after the war? The official line is that she returned to Germany and she died shortly after her return.
Okay.
From
She's in
flu
Scotland.
or whatever. There's a grave to her.
Oh, wow.
But one of her handlers, when he was debriefed, they said, well, what have you anything else to tell us? What about Vera? Do you know where she is now? Are you aware of her? He said, well, you should maybe look for her somewhere on the Isle of Wight.
Oh, wow.
So
See, all they would have to do is give them a change of name, a different
Yeah.
date of birth, even, and that's them. Give them
Yeah.
a place to go.
And because
Completely
it's not in
start.
the files exactly what she did, what she
Yeah.
revealed, she must have done something worthwhile,
Mhm.
to have
Yeah.
what we call the death release. In other words, they're going
Yeah.
to set her up
Yeah.
somewhere else, a brand new identity, a brand new start.
Wow.
So
She's somebody's
friends-
grandmother somewhere in Britain.
Well,
See-
exactly.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what she did, doesn't it? It
I
makes
know,
you wonder. I
yeah.
mean, did she
She's an
manage?
enigma. The
Oh, aye.
beautiful
Maybe
spy
you'll ever know.
is an enigma. So that's why we talk about her. There's been quite a nice biography written about her in the UK. There was also one written on the continent. There was a
Right.
film made on the continent about her too, which didn't really tell her. It was loosely based on her story, should we say?
It would have been a great life, though, wouldn't it, to be a spy? Wouldn't it just be amazing? It'd be brilliant. I'd love it.
So maybe somebody that's watching this, maybe they've got a suspicion, maybe they know that their granny, their great auntie, and maybe
Told
they
that
told
secret.
us
Yeah.
by saying
Yeah.
yes, but they've got to be able to prove it. They've got
See,
to
Yeah.
be able to
that
prove-
is fascinating because
Pictures or something are out there, isn't
see
there? Standing
that's
next
the
to
thing.
somebody.
There will be like
Absolutely right.
documentation somewhere. Obviously,
There
and the
are-
government will have documentation on
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
'cause
yeah.
They keep everything in the
You
government.
know something? This is a good era for things like that to be found because technically people that lived in those days are just, and I don't like saying this, but are just dying and people are like clearing out their houses and their attics and things. So there will be in the next 10, 20 years some of these hard facts found probably with people,
Well, we hope so. The trouble
Yeah.
is that you'll hear these horror stories of house clearance people that go in and families that
I know,
go
and
into
clear them
obscure
out.
auntie's house and all of the paperwork. What's happened to that? Oh, we threw that
I
away.
know, it's so silly.
And it could have
Mhm.
survived all that while. I've
Yeah.
talked to people. Oh yes, when we moved into the house, there was a radio system up in the loft.
Yeah.
That could have been a spies. And
What
the
was
trouble
it?
is, in the 1930s to 50s, radio was a massive thing in Britain. You could build
Yeah.
your own. It was a golden age, before a lot of people had TV. And so if you built, put in installed aerials, it
Yeah.
gave you a good reception.
Yes.
But Who knows what they were doing?
I know. An old hat box or something, an old case. Do not throw them out. Look inside.
Absolutely right. I've interviewed the daughter of a German spy.
Right.
And I can't say too much because it's going to be in the Infiltrator's book. And
Right.
her family don't know all the details yet.
Right.
I knew
That'd be
full
good.
well that her dad was a spy.
Right.
The MI5 files exist. But when I was talking to her, she loved her dad.
Yeah.
She was a little girl in World War II that saw her father. In her eyes, her father, her story, he'd been foolish enough to visit distant relatives in Germany in 1939.
All right.
He
Okay.
had come back, and because he'd been to do that, MI5 came along and he was arrested and interned. And, you know, they came along, they searched the house, and she was quite proud that her mum had walked past these people that were searching the house with what she said was the case full of the letters and took it down the garden where she claimed it to be.
Oh, the innocent kids.
Yeah. So my theory is, and I've got a bit of a way to go with it, that what mum knew, must have known it was a blooming radio.
Yeah.
And she's taken it down. Now, did she bury it? I know the address.
That's right.
Right, I'll bring the shovel.
I'm going to go down and I'm going to see if I can talk to I know the girl, the elderly lady who sadly passed. She remembered exactly where it was. I mapped it out where her mum went with it. It was to the bottom of the garden where there was a field. It would just be interesting to use a metal detector.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
I'll tell you.
Another book, Neil. It's another book.
Oh well, it will be an Infiltrator's book for sure. I wouldn't have published that in that lady's lifetime because she loved her dad.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
He wasn't what I'd call a Nazi in that he was involved in death camps or anything. What he was a very frustrated broadcaster. He'd written radio plays and wanted to work for the BBC. He did have German ancestry. This is before the war. They didn't want him.
Right.
So he had gone over to Germany. He did have distant family over there, but he'd got talking to, and Germany was very into using people. He'd spoken to people that were the equivalent of the German BBC. Oh, yes, you can come and do plays and
come
and bring your family.
Yeah.
And his mother-in-law was ill. If the mother-in-law had not been ill, wife, that little girl and her sister would have been in August 1939. They would have been over in Germany. And that's where they would have been. And their dad would, I mean, he mentions that their dad, he was getting involved. How much he knew of what he was really getting into.
I mean,
I don't know.
The Germans and Nazis, there's so much stuff that we do not know. Still to this day.
It's the most insidious infiltration that they will get people in so far, and then you can't. I mean, did you know in the 1930s, whether you were living in Germany or abroad, you had to register. If you didn't register as a German national, you could face quite a stiff fine, 500 Reich marks or something like that. So you'd feel it, They'd know where you were anyway. They'd sus with you, but you'd lose your right to come back. But they would also, once you are registered, you see, they'd be looking, mum and dad, but we could use that person. They're at the London School of Economics. Let's have a little chat with them. And if they don't want to comply because they're not feeling patriotic, well, your mum and dad, they've had one or two little anti-Nazi political views. Your auntie's actually Jewish. Oh, well, they could be banged up.
Yeah.
Or they might say that a relative has died, you cannot inherit unless you come back to Germany and sign for it in person and collect the money. So, in effect,
Wow.
they could have a hold over you. And in creating this, it would be probably the potential was the greatest spy network
Mm-hmm.
the
And a
world
lot
had.
of people, I bet, didn't know that was what they were getting roped into until it was too late, I bet.
Of course, they wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
You just think we're registering, and you didn't want a risk of losing inheritance if you come over to Britain to study, for example, and you've got all your money's in a German bank account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't access it.
Actually, there was I
Mhm.
watch a lot of stuff on World War II, especially the Nazis.
Mhm.
And I watched the thing. Remember, Hitler had the car, the VW, had this idea. He actually took that money to make his
Oh, God.
tanks. And he said to the public, he said, "Oh, there's this car, everybody's going to have a car." But in actual fact, he was turning out tanks, thousands of tanks.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's scary because there's so much about the Nazis that we still don't understand yet.
Mhm.
Because
Do you know my mum is still terrified because she can remember the
bombers.
we call him Di, but it was her dad. She can still remember all the air raids and things
Yeah.
like that and all the terror, and she's still to this day is terrified of Nazis. Still can't look at them on the telly.
I think that's
and
quite a
for
healthy way
anything.
to be, my darling, and send her our
Yeah.
love. You know,
Yes, she's still
I-
terrified of them. Mm-hmm.
what is scary is that as the generation that knew the Second World War is passing away, and I conclude my book with this thought: as I write, the first fascist government has been elected in Italy since the
Yeah.
Second World War.
Right.
Fascism
Mhm.
is on the rise
Yes.
across Europe. Make no mistake, it's on the rise.
Oh yeah.
It's seen
It's
as an
coming back.
acceptable type of political party in many parts of Europe.
And it's
Oh,
actually in the rise again in Germany. It's
Without a
actually,
doubt.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we ignore history, the
yeah.
warnings of the past
Oh, yeah.
at our peril. Make no mistake, there is
It's a
no
heavy
quarter
mistake to make
with
as
the
well.
Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
There's no quarter. If you can have people gain credence as Holocaust deniers, there's it's just
Oh
incredible
yeah,
to me.
definitely. Yeah, a lot of people deny the Holocaust happened.
I mean, even the history that's taught is a bit dodgy, frankly.
Well, a
For
lot to
example,
hide.
when they talk about the burning of the Reichstag,
Aye.
do you know about
Oh
that?
yeah.
That's kind of how the
Oh yeah.
Nazis came to power, and they
Yeah.
blamed it on this fellow called van der
Oh aye.
Lubbe.
Yeah.
And well,
No.
it's dodgy.
Yeah.
No
Yes, it's
one man
dodgy.
could have fired that Reichstag.
It's like
So, do you
the
want me to bring
invasion.
this round to a bit of ghostliness?
Yes.
Ghosty the Snook.
Are you ready?
What's it got, Steve?
This is we've come a long way around this, but you're going to love this.
You're not.
The most famous psychic medium in Nazi Germany was called Hanussen, and Hanussen he was as big as say Darren Brown or any of the fellas that you know today. You know, really big shows or big theatres. And he'd risen up, and now he's got a huge theatre in Berlin, and he's packing them in. And this is some of the early nights. He's going to really do the big launch. And he has this vision. He says, "I see a great building on fire. I see the brave stormtroopers of Nazi Germany marching, and the hero of the hour will be Adolf Hitler." Wow, he's predicted the burning of the Reichstag within days. The damn thing's in
Yeah.
ashes.
There you
How
go.
did Hanussen know? Well, Hanussen knew too much.
Mm-hmm.
And in
Oh, yeah.
fact, one of his, he had sort of road managers. One of his road managers had actually fled to Britain shortly after that because Hanussen had gone too far.
Yeah.
And to intimate that he knew that the Reichstag was going to catch fire, you know,
Yeah, that's a bit weird. We knew that.
German security knew that German security members had told him that they're going to burn the darn thing down.
Right.
yeah.
One
Oh, yeah.
slip, they owe him favors. Hanussen was having drugs parties. He's loaned money to Nazi officials, so they are in his debt.
Right.
His car, though, it's got nice Nazi flags on it. You know, he's actually Jewish by birth.
Wow.
And actually, he was one of those who had helped Hitler develop the scheme of rallies at night using flame and red and the dark background. So a lot of the Nazi image projection actually comes from a Jewish magician.
Right.
And the way Hitler would use his hands. Hanussen disappears. He's escorted from his theatre by two German security officers. What's happened to Hanussen? Oh, a few days later, he's discovered in a forest just outside Berlin. Oh no, they say it might have been suicide with 15 bullets from pistolas. Yeah, you're really going to pump that when most pistols contain what, 10 rounds maximum?
Yeah, you need to
His
reload.
body is absolutely riddled with it. It's
There
a
you go.
warning to all. It's a warning to all,
Yeah.
and that's when one of his managers flees to Britain, and that's why we knew that the firing of the Reichstag was always dodgy, and he told them. I have spoken, and I've found the MI5 files, and thanks to wonderful family trees and things that I've researched online, I've found his great nieces, 2 of them.
Oh, wow.
Right.
And that came as they always thought he had a bit of a past they didn't know about.
Right. There you go.
That is fascinating.
So
That is
That
absolutely
is
fascinating.
amazing, isn't it? What you can find out.
Stories to come.
It's I love especially World War II. The history of World War II is fascinating. I mean,
It's so secret. It's unbelievable. It's so secretive.
This is quite interesting to see how Germany invaded Poland. I didn't know this until like a few years ago, until I was a historian. I was watching it and they was talking about it, how the Germans actually dressed up as Polish soldiers.
Oh God, you'll hear
Wow.
And they actually said that they attacked, but it wasn't. It was Germans attacking each other.
Is true, or how much is black propaganda?
Exactly.
We don't know. And in fact, when they talked about the Blitzkrieg and they're invading the Low Countries into Belgium, into France.
That's right.
The British cartoonists, there's a Heath Robinson cartoon of these various people dressed as preachers, policemen, soldiers, and all sorts dropping by parachute.
Right.
We know that there were some uniform deceptions that went on, but the story that lingers, that my dear friend James Hayward wrote in his Myths and Legends of the Second World War book, where he gives me a very kind acknowledgement, and I greet you well, my old friend James. He tells the story of the nuns that were spies, and they were on British trains, and they're all in their wimples and everything, but they have a very masculine hand with a hairy arm.
Right.
And they get taken away by the police after passengers get a bit worried about them. The story emerges from the men out in France during the Battle of France. And I talked to one man, he swore he'd seen it. This woman dressed as a nun wearing wellies. And as she was cycling along, every morning she cycled along this road out of the village. And one day, so he said, he got his binoculars on her, and he saw she had very hairy and masculine legs.
Oh my!
And the story is that they then used the sniper scope, shot the nun, and went to investigate. And underneath the wimple, there she was, or he was, with his German uniform on. He just rolled his trousers up.
There you go.
And they weren't wellies, they were jack boots.
There's,
so who knows?
There's so many
hairy-handed nuns.
It's great. I love hearing about it all.
See, that's the mystery of World War II. Do you know that there's gold still to this day that the Nazis had that's never been found?
Oh, probably would.
What was it, like $50-60 million worth of like gold in the 1930s, 1940s? Can you imagine what that's worth now? Billions of gold. It's never been found. It's been buried somewhere.
Even the
And then
story
people would
finding
die.
it would be amazing.
See, that's
People
our
in
next
the chat.
mission.
Yep.
Yeah.
Listen
Metal
through.
detectors out.
They'll be the Raiders of the Lost Gold. But the funny thing
Yeah.
is, the minute you find stuff like that, countries tend to start getting involved and claiming it.
Well, yeah.
Did you hear
Better be
that?
careful.
Now, you'll have
That's
to
the
forgive
thing,
me if I
because
get the story wrong, or whether it's all turned out to be a hoax, but I don't think so. They'd bought one of these military museums or
Yeah.
restoration guys bought a tank, and it's a tank that had been through, I believe it was the Gulf War. And when they were taking the metal plate inside apart, they'd always thought the tank was heavy because gold is very heavy.
Oh yeah.
And when they took this plate off on the inside, and there's film of it. I believe you can find it on the internet if it's still out there. And they pulled out this bar because if you're in a country where there's war torn, they try and evacuate gold.
Yeah.
And he pulls out this heavy bar of gold
Wow.
and another bar of gold. And I think there were 4 or 5 that had been stashed in this tank during the Gulf War. But I've got a feeling it had to be handed back.
Oh yeah.
Probably.
I mean,
How much reward they got, I don't know.
I mean,
probably
if you really think about it with World War II, right, a lot of that gold was took from the Jews. A lot of
Oh
it
God,
was,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
because they actually pulled people's
horrific.
teeth.
Yes.
They actually had
horrific.
barrels full of gold teeth,
Yes,
and it was sealed away in mines and stuff like that. And a
it's
lot of
horrific.
that
And
gold should be
artworks.
given back. Oh yeah.
Artworks that are absolutely priceless. Some of them because of the way they were stored badly or in areas that were bombed. Artworks.
Right.
Goering had a specific department. In
I
fact,
know.
most of the German high-ups had sort of. You've heard of the Monuments Men.
The
Well,
monument
these
men.
are-
Yeah.
These are the Germans had specialist teams going out to collect art, and if the Führer had not sort of said, "I want that," it was pretty much fair game for any other senior Nazi officer to go for their own version of the Fallen Madonna with the big boobies by Van Klomp.
I mean, because the Nazis had what do you call them, like archaeological teams looking for the spear of destiny and stuff like mad things like that.
My goodness.
They actually had these people out looking for the Holy Grail and stuff like that.
Powerful as, in many ways, almost as powerful, I would say, as the Ark of the Covenant. It was the spear. This is the spear that would have been used by the Roman centurion to pierce the body of Christ on the cross.
Right.
And historically, the spear had been carried in battle, rather like the Ark of the Covenant, that seemed to have this nuclear-like device power within it. The spear of destiny, if that is carried before any army, the army is pretty much.
Well, he was getting desperate. He was getting desperate.
Himmler was a great believer in this kind of mysticism.
Oh yeah.
So I think it was Hitler or Himmler. Goering was going after the art treasures.
Yes.
They wanted the more mystic treasure.
Of course, the SS, if you really think about it, were into the occult. And they were
See, I knew they went after all the artwork and things, but I didn't know they tried to start to get all the different religious pieces as well. I didn't know that.
God, yeah. They're only the most powerful ones. And it's pretty sinister. But what is interesting is that
what did they want them for?
Well, exactly.
Power.
Exactly. And did Hitler really use an astrologer? Really? Or was that all a sort of black propaganda?
Some of it probably was.
Because
the
story was we had a guy called De Waal, and who, strangely enough, De Waal went on to write a book called The Spear of Destiny. But he got involved with MI5, and he tried to say that he was. They worked with him a bit, and he tried to say, well, he's the sort of psychic department of MI5. So they actually put him over to America on some sort of tour.
Yeah.
Keep him out of mischief. But he was
to the US.
He was a nightmare. But one of the main men for deception and propaganda who is often forgotten is Dennis Wheatley, who wrote The Devil Rides Out.
Mm-hmm.
He had quite a... I mean, what's fiction, what's for real? But he's certainly there at the committee tables working in intelligence at quite a high level. So what was he doing? Whether Aleister Crowley was that closely involved with the Nazis or whatever, or whether that was yet another Crowley story, I really don't know.
I definitely think there's a connection. Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't surprise me. Or Crowley was described himself as the great beast. And his evil ways would have
the time frame and everything all works out for that, doesn't it? Like Crowley and things for the Nazis. It definitely works out the time frame.
The sort of psychometry, Drew, and that he's working on. I just think it's an amusing story that we had to have this DeWalt department where supposedly we had astrologers working out what Hitler's astrologer would be predicting for him.
All right, because you can look back the times, can't you? That's amazing what they would be telling them.
The trouble is, if you read back in the day, the Daily Express's horoscope, if it's not by the same
depends
person,
what you followed.
Oh my God. I used to read that.
It's going to be completely different in the Sunday Sun or whatever with Mystic Pig and Russell
Don't go near
Crowe's
the
telling you
Russians.
something completely different.
Don't go near the Russians in 1942. Stay away from the Americans.
It was definitely a crazy time though. Even just after the war and things, people's heads were just all over the place. So you can imagine the amount of things that they did start to get into, you know.
Absolutely right. Absolutely, and there will still be more to come out. We were going to talk more about ghosts tonight, but
we could talk for hours.
We'll keep it going for another 15 or 20 minutes. We'll keep it going for another 15 minutes.
You know, the more you dig, the more you find about spies.
Yeah.
And I just think it's absolutely fascinating.
It is. That book that you're bringing out, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, there'll be the link underneath this video. Please go and get it because I think it'll be fascinating. I would love to go to that beach where they landed.
Oh well, yes, you can go to up to Port Gordon. Now this is up in the wilds of the Eastern Highlands. I must admit, and I love Scotland. I toured it last during some of the best weather it had ever had on record.
Yes, we did.
And it was absolutely hilarious that I was there doing my little bit of history with an American group of tourists. And they were getting into lovely old castle hotels and all sorts. And they were saying, "We're going to die. We've got no AC."
Oh, no.
These hotels, why don't they have air conditioning in Scotland? And I said, well, these are very unusual weather conditions in Scotland.
Yes, it was.
There they are, 10 o'clock at night, sat in the garden having cigarettes. I can't survive without AC.
It's like last year I didn't get my AC in my car done, and I got into the car and it was like maybe 39 outside Celsius outside. I got into the car and I shut the door and I couldn't touch the steering wheel. It was I'm driving down the road trying to touch it. I needed a pair of the welding gloves just to drive down the road. Luckily, I've had it gassed, so this year the engine.
But it looks pretty windswept. Where if you look up towards Port Gordon, and it must have some nice days sometimes. But on the beach where they came ashore, it would be known in Scotland as the Golicky Burn, and that's it's a little burn, it's a little stream, a little inlet that they came in on the rubber boat. And I believe there's still a nature walk that takes you along the bed of the railway. If you get my book's not the only one to show pictures of that. Others are available. You can find pictures of when the railway station was intact.
Right.
My book's quite nice that you can see the rest of the village behind it.
Yeah.
so you can kind of
Gives you a
get-
better placing.
yeah, because it's
Easy to
gone
find.
now. But you can walk from the village itself up to where the railway station was. So you can get and
Yeah.
walk along to the Golicky Burn. So you can get. I think the burn certainly has not changed very much at all. You get a real sense of place in Port Gordon because it's so unspoiled.
Yeah.
It'd be good.
And maybe
It
we
would.
don't want to go on a super weather day because it wasn't a very nice day
It'd
when
be
they
good
landed.
to. It'd be
Well,
good
that's
for
it.
you.
Mhm.
It'd be good for you, Neil, to like walk from the beach, from the start of the water to the train station.
Oh,
As they
God, love
walked.
to.
Oh,
I would love to. I would love to make that
Mhm.
journey one day. I was hoping that I'd be able to get up there and do that with one of our groups last year, but
Yeah.
time was
You've
against
got a new
us.
hip now, Neil. You've got
Aye.
a new hip now, and you're
With the
ready to
bionic
go.
New
man.
hip.
Yes.
Well, I
You
tell
can
you,
do it.
if you want to investigate it, we will go
Mhm.
together, and we will
Yeah.
go
We will do
up
it.
to Port Gordon. It's not far from Nairn. There's some
Yeah.
super
Right.
little villages, some lovely old hotels around that area, and I met some really nice folks up there. Very
It's
very
beautiful up there.
welcoming.
Mhm.
You know,
It's
it's a
beautiful.
nice neck of the woods. It
Wondering
really,
if-
really was nice to visit, but I'd like
I'm on
to give
podcast.
Somebody's phone. Ah, dear.
It's the
Somebody's
spies
Upstairs.
getting to you, Drew. They know that we're onto them.
Aye.
They're
See?
not upstairs.
See, that's thing. I would honestly like to say thank you for coming on, Neil. Honestly, it's been
Oh,
absolutely
it's a pleasure.
fantastic.
I
And
love
we'll
it.
need to
I'm
get you
sorry if
back
I've been
again.
gassing a bit too much, but it's been
Mm-mm.
so lovely to share these
No chance.
stories in such an impromptu talk about spies. Listen, I'll give you a very, very quick little preview for next time we're getting together.
Right.
Ponder this one. Lights, orbs. Now, everywhere in the country you've known orbs.
Mhm.
Are they now? They're not all legitimate on ghosts on photographs. We know there've
Mhm.
been those problems.
Yeah.
I'm talking about heighter sprites, ghost
Yes.
lights, ghost lights that in Scotland. And I've been reading a wonderful book which includes ghost lights by Alistair Alpin McGregor. It's absolutely fantastic.
Right.
And he talks about these ghost lights that drift in across the sea or across the land, and then they will suddenly, there'll be a flash, and you may
Mhm.
see figures
I've read
within.
that before somewhere.
Now,
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
people and local folklore, because they've been known for many years,
Yeah.
will say, "Oh, it's the dead servant girl or the mother and
Oh,
child
yeah.
that were washed away." Well, here's a question I pose to you. Suppose I would transplant the word that it's the ghost of a woman and child in the orb that suddenly flashed,
Mhm.
and I were to say the word humanoids.
Right.
I know what you're talking about, right? I mean, there
Is
is a
this
lot
a
of unusual
twist?
sightings.
Mhm.
It's
Is
I
it
know
a
what you're
twist
getting to.
that if I mean, is this, Arthur C. Clarke said, the great,
Yes.
the man that inspired so many of us to love mysteries, the man who invented the communication satellite, Arthur C. Clarke, that, and I praise see his words, that if we experience technology way beyond our knowledge and comprehension,
Yes.
it looks like magic. So
Yes.
have we
Mhm.
been experiencing UFOs and I mean, I'm not saying these are aliens, I'm not saying
Yeah.
these are from this earth. Keep the open mind.
Yeah.
But as we see more and more of these illuminated large figure orbs featuring in UFOs, literally unidentified, we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
We see them in modern cases. Could it be that we've been seeing UFOs and humanoids associated with UFOs, these glowing orbs, far longer than we realize?
I
Well, that's a question, isn't it? Mhm.
It is I mean, I'm not saying I've got
I think-
conclusive proof. I mean,
It's
I
everything
think
is
that's
all
a
esoteric.
definite.
No.
it's all ifs and buts and maybes, and but is it?
It's,
And this is something to ponder.
Yeah. I've been thinking
I
about
know
that all
exactly
night
what
now,
you're
Neil.
Think about
know
ghost
exactly.
lights.
I know, but I know exactly what you're talking about, Neil.
That's the kind of thing that keeps me awake.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It looked like it was an orb, and it just shot off and then went.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And as
It
it
just
goes,
disappeared straight up into.
they might
I know.
glimpse people, see people associated with it. And my new big project that I'm working on, ready for next year, is a book that I don't try to prove or disprove. I want to tell the story of UFOs over Britain.
Right. Mhm.
And I've
That'll be
found,
good.
I mean, I think you could trace them back a lot further, but I'm really looking at the
Oh, yeah.
whole 20th century,
Yeah.
including
Yes.
Yeah,
the-
bad, you
the
can
dra-
place it back.
the-
Uh-huh.
the dramatic events of 1909, when we were
Right.
Yes.
experiencing scare ships over this
Yes.
country.
Hmm.
Are they
It's fascinating.
phantoms? Are they zeppelins?
Mhm.
Or are they visitations of
Well, that's the thing. Our government's
UFO?
lied to us all forever, so we just don't
Yeah.
know.
So ghost lights and scare ships. If you would
Oh
like
my
to have
God.
me back, and
It's
I'd
gonna be a
certainly
brilliant
love
book.
to come and join you again, that's what we'll talk about. With
Yes,
case histories.
that's we'll have.
Neil, we
What we'll
could
need
do
to do
a
is
series of once a month where you come on. Yes, every 4 weeks or something. We need to have a Neil
Oh my
special.
darling. Let's see what we can do. I'd like
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
I'd like that very much. Whether I can do it that regularly, I'm often on location. Which
Yeah, I
means
know.
that the
I'm just being greedy for your time.
oh bless you, darling. That's very sweet. And
I
would
would
love
speak to you every night.
Oh, my God. Do you know?
Well, I should say I would
it's so
listen every
lovely.
night.
Thank you so. I mean, I'm sure we've all got lots of lovely friends, and friends are very, very precious, and friends get you through the dark times. But
Definitely.
not all of our friends like to talk ghosts and legends
Well,
quite
that's
like
it.
we do,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that's why it's really nice to have this kind of deluxe experience.
Yes.
it's
where we can.
it's fascinating. I think it's absolutely fascinating.
So
Talking
do
about
I.
ghosts and obviously
Me
talking
too.
about UFOs, and I do think even if you go back to the 17th century, there's reports in the United Kingdom, Scotland, and stuff like that of strange things in the sky.
If you want to go back further,
Oh
you
yeah,
can find them in some of the monastic tracts in right back 11th, 12th centuries.
Wow.
yes,
In the medieval mind, and the medieval, you know, that they're some of these manifestations. Oh, it's a demon. It's
I
an
know.
angel.
I know.
But
Yeah.
if we were to say, where is a UFO? Where are the
If it
angels?
cause anything strange, everybody
Mhm.
always says it's something
Yeah.
bad. Where if it's just strange, it's strange. It's no
We
bad nor
always fear, perhaps quite healthily, the unknown.
yeah. Mhm.
Cool, that could be
We-
like the 1950s, like the Twilight Zone.
Doesn't
There.
mean you're
Aye.
good.
do not
Yeah,
adjust
but-
your laptops, Neil Storey, and you come with a funny screen, you know, like a TV out of focus, you know. Do you know we'll get you back soon, and we'll have
It'd
to
be
talk
lovely.
about we'll have to talk about the UFO subject and stuff like that, and phantoms and
Oh yes,
strange unknown
UFOs and
things.
phantom
And,
airships.
oh, hi. See, I know people that worked in the Navy and stuff like that, and they seen strange things round about the coast of Scotland and stuff like that
Yeah.
that they could not
Yeah.
explain. They just could not explain it. It's like that lighthouse in Scotland where the lighthouse keepers just disappeared one night.
Disappeared. Mhm.
The three of them gone.
All they found
And-
was the kelp.
That's
Yes,
it. Mhm.
exactly. So
Gone.
I would
forever.
like, honestly, I would like to thank Neil for coming on, Andrew for coming on, and everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for coming. All new subscribers, thank you so much. We're nearly at 2,000 subscribers too. So we'll talk to you, Neil, and you, Drew, behind the scenes after the broadcast. But thank you very much, everybody, for coming on, and have a fantastic
guys.
week. Tune in on Friday night. We're going to have an open panel night where everybody can join and have a good yap about the spirits. Catch you
Ooh.
later.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
What's that?
Thank you for joining us on this exciting adventure with Ghost Squad Scotland. Our team of experienced ghost hunters use the latest technology to explore the paranormal and uncover the truth about the unknown. Don't forget that we're affiliated with Spirit Shack, the UK's premier ghost hunting equipment store, so you can trust our equipment to be top-notch. Plus, we have exclusive Ghost Squad Scotland merch available on our Zazzle store, so you can show your support for the team in style. And if you can't get enough of our ghost hunting adventures, be sure to tune into the Bonkers TV network to catch our show in action. Content creators can even have their own content syndicated on the network, or create their own custom online TV channel by visiting bonkers.net. Thank you for your support. And remember to always keep an open mind as we continue to explore the mysteries of the paranormal with Ghost Squad Scotland.